One evening while catching butterflies, I discovered a strange turquoise cocoon and brought it home, but what emerged from it wasn't a butterfly. It was a creature named PJ. He grew incredibly fast, helped around the house, scared off stray dogs, and even saved my shed from a fire. Everything almost felt normal, until one day, PJ disappeared, and when I finally saw him again at the door, he had grown enormous. And behind him lay 3 new mysterious cocoons. I am a naturalist. I have always liked observing insects and studying their behavior. Sometimes I catch butterflies so I can examine them closely, write down their features, and then release them back into nature. That day, I went out to the field behind my house with a net and a small container. The weather was calm and there was almost no wind. A few ordinary butterflies were slowly flying above the grass, and I walked between the bushes watching them and occasionally writing notes. I moved carefully so I would not scare them away, sometimes stopping to examine the plants and check if there were any cocoons or larvae on them. After some time, I was already preparing to go back home. I folded the net and started walking along the small path that runs near the bushes. But then I noticed something unusual hanging on a branch of a low shrub. At first I thought it was just a normal cocoon of some large insect. When I came closer, it was clear that it looked different. It was much larger than the cocoons that usually appear in this area. Its surface looked dense and slightly glossy, and it seemed as if something inside was actively forming. Color was unusual as well. The main color was bright green, but there were purple spots all across the surface that looked almost like patterns. I decided to remove it carefully. Did it slowly so I would not damage the shell. The cocoon felt quite heavy for its size. I placed it into a small observation box that I normally use for studying insects and gently closed the lid. Then I headed home while thinking about what kind of butterfly could possibly be inside. At home, I have a small artificial garden. I built it myself several years ago. There are plants inside, several branches hanging from the frame, a small fountain, and a warm light lamp. Sometimes I use this place to observe insects during their transformation stages. I carefully hung the cocoon on one of the branches where it slowly swung in the air. Next to it there was an old spray bottle. On it there was a drawing of a flower and the word poppy. I bought it years ago at a flea market. There was also a small label that said Playtime Company. I filled it with water and lightly sprayed the plants around the garden. Then I sprayed a small amount directly onto the cocoon. At that moment the cocoon slightly moved. I stopped and looked at it carefully. A few seconds later it moved again, just a little. I realized something inside was alive and changing. I stood there for a while watching it and then left the garden as it was and went to sleep. The next morning I woke up quite early. The first thing I thought about was the cocoon. I immediately walked to the room with the artificial garden. When I entered the room, everything seemed normal at first, but then I noticed that the branch where the cocoon had been hanging was empty. The cocoon itself was lying on the floor. I picked it up and saw that the shell had opened. It was torn from one side. The inside was empty. I carefully checked the plants, the branches, and even looked under the table, but there was nothing there. I thought the butterfly might have already flown away, but the window was closed and the door was closed too. I started examining the room more carefully and slowly walked around trying to notice any kind of trace. Then I heard a sound. At first it was quiet, but after a moment it became clearer. They were footsteps, but the footsteps were strange. They were very fast and very small, as if many tiny legs were moving across the floor at the same time. On the floor I noticed small tracks. The tracks led directly toward the kitchen. When I looked into the kitchen I saw a creature standing near a bowl of fruit. Its body was long and many small legs ran along its sides. Its head looked like the face of a small puppy. It was PJ Pugapillar. He was holding an apple and calmly eating it. When he noticed me, he stopped. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. He tilted his head slightly and then made a quiet bark. I decided not to make any sudden movements. I slowly walked closer and placed a plate of fruit on the floor. The creature carefully moved closer. It smelled the apple and began eating. After that, it looked at me again and slowly wagged its tail. The following days were very unusual. PJ grew quickly. Every day his body became longer. There were more legs and he moved faster each day. Sometimes he crawled along the walls. Sometimes he climbed onto the wardrobe. Sometimes he simply lay nearby watching everything I was doing. I started feeding him regularly. He liked fruits and vegetables and sometimes even cookies. After a while, it became clear that he was very intelligent. If I dropped a tool, he would bring it back to me. Sometimes PJ even had me around the house. He carefully carried small objects, brought tools when I needed them, and sometimes even watered the plants using the spray bottle. One evening I heard dogs barking outside near the barn. A group of stray dogs was digging near the door. I went outside to see what was happening. PJ quietly slipped outside with me. He slowly crawled toward the dogs and suddenly stretched his body. He began moving around quickly like a long snake. The dogs became frightened and quickly ran away. About a week later, something else happened. During the night, I smelled smoke and woke up immediately. Something was burning. The fire had started inside the barn. It looked like old wiring had caught fire. I ran to get water, but PJ moved faster than I did. He quickly crawled around the flames and his long body pushed the fire away from the wooden walls. Then he grabbed a bucket and tipped it over the burning area. Within a few minutes, the fire was out. Over time, I began to notice other strange things. PJ sometimes watched television. He seemed interested in old recordings. One day, an old commercial appeared on the screen from Playtime Company. On the screen, there was a character that looked exactly like him. PJ stared at the screen quietly and made a soft whining sound. I rewound the video. It showed a children's play center with a huge play maze, and inside it, there was a giant PJ Pug-a-Pig. A few days later, the last strange thing happened. I returned home in the evening, but PJ was nowhere to be found. I searched the whole house, including the garden, the kitchen, and the barn, but he was gone. Then I heard a familiar sound. Many small legs moving together. The sound was coming from outside. I opened the door. PJ was standing on the doorstep. He was much bigger now. Behind him were 3 cocoons. He gently pushed them toward me. I understood that he had found others like himself. I found the cocoons in the garden next to the branch where the first cocoon had been. PJ lay down beside them and slowly fell asleep. Before I turned off the light, I noticed something strange. On each cocoon, there was a small logo. Playtime Company. And at that moment, I understood something. I had not simply found a cocoon, I had found the beginning of something much bigger.